Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is James Duff Merritt, and I want to welcome you to the K-Sam Speaks podcast. Now, this is a podcast where topics involving law enforcement are discussed while offering real and transparent answers. Now, we are not trying to change the world, but just change one heart at a time. Here's your host, K-Sam.
What's up? What's up? Welcome back to another episode of the K-Sam Speaks podcast. I'm your host, K-Sam. Ladies and gentlemen, on this episode, we're going to take a trip down to Indianapolis, dating back to 2020, where Officer Brianne Leath, who was an Indianapolis Metropolitan police officer, she was killed in the line of duty after being shot on a domestic incident. But before we get started, I want to talk about the number of police officers that's being shot at a high rate right now. So this information is fairly up to date, but just as of the first week of May, there are approximately 140 police officers that has been shot in the line of duty. 140 that's been shot already, and we just getting into the 5th month of the year. I think last year numbers ended at 368, if I'm not mistaken. But just in the middle of April, I think sometime in the middle of April, I forgot the exact date, we had an incident where there were 11 officers shot just in 3 days. 3 days, and you had 11 of this approximately 140 officers that were shot. And then on May 3rd, you had four officers that were shot in 12 hours. So doing the average, just in the year, this year, you having about one officer shot every 21 hours. One officer shot every 21 hours with no media coverage. Nothing, no media coverage, no CNN, no White House speaking up about it. Sleepy Joe, Uncle Joe, Papa Joe, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. Nobody is talking about these numbers. Why? Why not? It's a question I'll continue to ask, but my job is to constantly bring the updated numbers to make everybody aware of what's happening to police officers. And then it is always going to go back to why nobody want to be a police officer. Why are police departments are short-staffed? Why is it so hard to recruit people? No matter how much money you're making, I mean, where I'm at, we making good money, and we still facing recruiting problems. Because look at these numbers. Over 140 officers shot just for doing their job? Come on, man. We got to be better. We got to be better. I saw a video on Instagram where this police officer was fighting with somebody. And instead of people like intervening to help, everybody was just videoing and laughing and thought it was funny. And it's like, where are we going in society? Like, what are we doing? Like, nobody have any values of trying to help the next person out. But let the cops be brutally beating somebody and watch how fast people want to jump in and jump on the cop and stuff like that. But in today's episode, like I said, I'm going to talk about Officer Brianne Leath. But the reason why I want to spotlight her case, her incident that happened in 2020, is because recently they finally finished the trial of the suspect, Mr. Elias Dorsey, who was ultimately found guilty, but not in a way that the family and the police department and I'm sure the citizens of Indianapolis was hoping. Well, what I mean by that? Well, he was found guilty, but mentally ill is what they found him guilty as. So what does that mean? Well, instead of him facing a mental charge, instead of him facing a murder charge, that got dropped down to reckless homicide. Reckless homicide. But let's just notate that reckless homicide in Indianapolis may be different from anywhere else across the state. But we're not going to dive too deep into that. But guilty but mentally ill on 6 counts, including reckless homicide instead of murder in this 2020 shooting death of Officer Leath. So I'm going to give you a little summary of the case before I break down my highlighted points that I want to make from this case. So Officer Leath was 24 years old. She leaves behind at the time of her death was a 2.5-year-old son. This incident took place on April 9th of 2020, where her and some coworkers responded to a domestic disturbance where the caller, who was Mr. Dorsey's girlfriend, called to have him removed from the apartment, stating that he was acting erratically and she wanted him gone. But at no point did she mention that he was armed. Officer Leath and 3 other officers arrived to the apartment, and Mr. Dorsey fired 8 shots through the closed door, which 2 of those shots struck Officer Leath in the head. Dorsey also shot his girlfriend as she was fleeing the apartment. It should be noted that Mr. Dorsey had a Kel-Tec handgun, which shoots the same bullets as an AR-15. So let me stop right here because I have a couple points I want to make too. Let's go back to the responding to a domestic call. You know, time and time again, people say that, or the news media, should I say, would say that, oh, police was responding to a routine call, a routine traffic stop, a routine call for service, a routine domestic incident, a routine this, routine that. Nothing is routine in police work. And because what may be a routine traffic stop for something as simple as a moving violation, well, you don't know who's in that car that you're stopping. That may be somebody who just committed a violent crime, and they don't want to get caught. So they have it on their mind that when this officer walk up to my car, I'm going to shoot him. Happens all the time. This may be a person who have warrants out for their arrest. Don't want to go back to jail. I have it on my mind to hurt this officer, so I won't go to jail in this moment. So again, nothing is routine about any call, especially domestic disturbances. But let's go to the type of weapon Mr. Dorsey had. Time and time again, you see news media point out about police being too militaristic or too militarized with the vest that we have, the armor that we have, the weapons that we carry, the armored vehicles that we carry. But what people failing to realize, these criminals on the streets are carrying way better weapons than what police are carrying. No police officer is carrying a Kel-Tec handgun that shoots the same bullets as a AR-15 rifle, assault rifle. Nobody is carrying that on duty. So why on certain incidences do we carry, do we pull out our rifles or the ballistic shields or even take out the big armored vehicle, also known as the Bearcat? It's because we are faced with more firepower than what we have. Then our soft body armor, not stopping that. So we are already outmatched in the gunfight, just like that, just that quick. Another point I want to point out from this is talking about dispatch. I hear people get so frustrated when dispatchers ask so many questions, and it's because reasons like this. Not once that the information that Mr. Dorsey was armed, whether it wasn't asked by the dispatchers or whether the caller just didn't say it. Again, I know it's frustrating, but what y'all have to realize is once you place that 911 call, the call is already activated. It's already started. We already en route. It's getting dispatched to the proper authorities, whether it's fire, EMS, or police. We're already on the way. Answering these questions don't delay or prolong the response time. Some of these questions are real important and real pertinent information to determine how us as officers will respond. So that's what I want to point out. So going to the trial, he was facing charges of murder, attempted murder, criminal confinement, and 3 counts of criminal recklessness. And during that, like I said, he was found guilty, but mentally ill. So that reduced the charge from the murder charge to the reckless homicide charge. And during the whole trial, excuse me, during the whole trial, Mr. Dorsey claimed that he wasn't in his mental right state of mind during this incident. And he said things like he feared for his life, thinking that the woman who called the police on him, that she actually called people to come and kill him. He also made a claim that he didn't know that it was officers because they didn't announce themselves, nor did they knock on the door. But like I stated earlier, Mr. Dorsey fired 8 shots through a closed door. So you didn't give them a chance probably to knock on the door. You didn't give them a chance to probably announce themselves. Nor did you even open up the door to see who it was. So to say that, to use that as a defense, I think is weak. Is real weak. How when criminals commit these violent acts on law enforcement, how much leeway they get to try to justify or prove their mental state during the incident. Their mental state during the incident. And it happens all the time. Officer Middlebrook with Lafayette, Louisiana, in his case, for years, this specific Officer Leath case happened in 2020, and this just got finalized this year in 2024. So why do they get so much time to plead their case of whether or not I was mentally sane or not? So moving to the trial, the center of the trial was whether or not what was his mental state during the time of the shooting, and his overall mental health was the center arguments of the trial. So what his defense did was they brought in experts to testify that Mr. Dorsey was in the midst of a psychotic episode during the incident, and that he was unaware that shooting bullets through the door was wrongful and an illegal act. So that's why I want to talk about mental culpability and criminal culpability. And it's hard to prove, especially for some experts who wasn't there, who probably, like, how can the expert prove what was his mental state during the incident or not, is what I have a hard time believing. But when police officers get involved in a questionable shooting on duty, not once nobody talks about what was your mental state at the time of the incident. I'm sorry, y'all. I see my top lip. I got that sweat on my top lip. It's hot up here. But nobody ever talks about the police mental health during the incident. So in total, they brought in 7 doctors to speak to the jury about his steadily declining mental state, and said that he was not in the proper reality when he fired the fatal shots. And then they even tried to throw in there that he used marijuana that day that led to his psychosis. Like, really? So how would you feel? Let's go take out your police officer pair of shoes or your family pair of shoes. How would you feel if your loved one got killed in the line of duty in this matter, and you sit in the courtroom and you hear this? You hear them justifying his actions by, oh, he smoked marijuana that day and that's why he was in a psychotic state. Or that, oh, he didn't know that shooting bullets through a door was a wrongful and illegal act. Like, really? Anybody knows that shooting bullets through a closed door without identifying your target? Like, what you think is going to happen? But here's something else for y'all. His attorneys also argued that the COVID-19 pandemic, his history of playing football, and his romantic relationship issues was the contribution to his overall paranoia and psychotic episode. Think about that. So you see how they are lining up all of his excuses to justify his actions of whether or not he knew the difference between right and wrong when he made the decision to shoot bullets through the door with someone on the other side. So you didn't know if it was right or wrong, but yet you knew that you was potentially shooting bullets at somebody on the other side of the door who you thought was coming to kill you. And as his defense, they had to prove that he understood the wrongfulness of his actions. And it's just, again, it's mind-blowing that we give these people so much leeway when it's against law enforcement. It happens every time when it's a shooting where a law enforcement officer is killed, that these suspects get so much, and they get to play on the insanity plea so long. Like, what signs does that send to law enforcement? You know, like, what does that show us? Because we don't get that same argument. We don't get that same case, because as law enforcement, we're supposed to be professional. We're responsible for our actions and what we do, and we need to be held accountable. I actually read this news article, and it popped back up here recently when I was looking for some information involving Derek Chauvin. And this was a quote from appeals judge Peter Reyes, and he says, quote, "Police officers undoubtedly have a challenging, difficult, and sometimes dangerous job. However, no one is above the law. When they commit a crime, they must be held accountable just as those individuals that they lawfully apprehend. The law only permits police officers to use reasonable force when effecting a lawful arrest." So against Derek Chauvin, they said that he crossed the line when he used unreasonable force on George Floyd. So again, talking about accountability, but yet everybody's quick to hold law enforcement accountable. I'm sorry again, y'all. I have a little sinus drip going on. But everybody wants to hold law enforcement accountable, but we don't hold these suspects accountable. And I just don't understand it. And even this judge, so going into the deliberations of this case, this judge brought the jury back in, and let me see what he said. Let me see. I have this article right here. So, so Mr. Dorsey, they determined that he was legally insane when he pulled the trigger, but the judge says something along the lines that kind of made everybody upset. Nope, and I can't find it right now. But anyway, essentially, when it came down to giving the sentencing, the judge had many options on the table. Let me see. I'm sorry. I just had it, and I lost my spot. Okay, here we go. So they either could find him guilty by mentally ill on all 6 counts, which would reduce the charges. So they had to choose from mere guilty or not guilty, or straight up guilty and not guilty to verdicts inclusive of his mental health, such as guilty but mentally ill or not responsible due to insanity. But at the end of it, the jury landed on guilty but mentally ill, and they also found him guilty of killing Officer Leath, but didn't charge him with murder. So then now the judge, his part in the trial, where he does the sentencing aspect of it. So here was his options, which could include probation, treatment, or set prison sentence. So what Mr. Judge decided to do was give him time served. So on the death of Officer Leath, time served on the death of Officer Leath. So what that means is he was in jail for about 4 years. So those that time he was in jail since the day that he committed the crime to the time where he got sentenced right here, he got time served for the reckless homicide towards Officer Leath. Now, he got sentenced to 15 years of mental health probation after he served his prison time. So he ended up getting some prison time for the other charges of the other charges of shooting at the other officers that was around Officer Leath and the other officers. I'm sorry, and his girlfriend. I'm sorry, I got a notification I need to attend to real quick. So, ladies and gentlemen, like, it's imperative that so accountability. Everybody always want to talk about law enforcement accountability. We need to hold law enforcement accountable. But here is a clear case of a judge who, according to the readings, does this time and time again where where he gives these weak sentences to people and let them off with a lesser degree of a charge. You know, it's heartbreaking for the family that they have to deal with this, essentially, because in most cases that deserves a death penalty, like, without a doubt. So the Indianapolis Fraternal Order of Police released a statement that says that today's verdict of guilty brings justice for Breann, and the jury's finding included a finding of a mentally ill, which they do respect the decision, and ultimately the defendant was still found responsible and faces prison. But from what this guy said in the interview, officers don't want to work there, not under that criminal justice system, because it shows what you think about your law enforcement officers. It shows that you don't care. You know, they took away a young officer. She was 24 years old, just starting her career. And just like that, it came to an end. And it happens just that quick. You know, and that's why I said that it's no routine call. No routine call. So I just want to bring this to y'all to show how criminals get more culpability and get more insanity pleas than what law enforcement. They didn't give George Floyd. They didn't give Derek Chauvin a chance to say that he was insane during his incident. You know, I could go down the list of officers who didn't get that same treatment during their trial. But in fact, they actually got sentenced way quicker, like probably a year or two, if not quicker than that, than what we seen these criminals get sentenced to. So again, think about that. If you was her family, how would that make you feel? So with that, I'll leave you with my final words. One of the best skills you can learn is how to listen without the need to reply. That is all for this episode. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Make sure y'all share, like, subscribe to YouTube channel, Facebook, and Instagram at KSAM Speaks Podcast. I'll see y'all next time.